Hi everyone, my name's Tommy Keeley. I'm a Growth PM at Amplitude. And today we're going to dive into some useful tactics related to growth product management in the age of AI. So we'll talk about how you can practically integrate AI into your workflow, how the Growth PM role is evolving, and then some tactics for moving faster and smarter. All right, so this is the roadmap for our session. So first, prompt like a pro, how to turn AI into really a sparring partner and not just a yes man. And then second, build it yourself. So why PMs really should be getting their hands dirty and experimenting in the code and the design. And then last, unlock hidden insights. So how can we use AI really to sharpen our judgment and uncover the non-obvious growth levers that are out there? All right, so let's dive in. Each of these three sections really are meant to cover at a high level the different parts of the software development lifecycle. So the fundamental pieces of building software are still the same. We still move from idea through execution into learning and iteration. But what has changed is the speed of this cycle and the tools that we're using at each phase. All right, so let's start at the beginning here with prompt like a pro. So AI prompts are incredible new tools in our toolkit, but we've all seen AI be overly agreeable. And this really is not what makes us better PMs. So let's talk about how could we actually level up our prompts so AI can produce better outcomes for us. So here's the issue. So when you ask AI about your idea, it often just cheers you on, even when it's a terrible idea, right? I think we've all experienced that. So by default, AI is going to tell you what you want to hear, not what you should hear. And that's really, really dangerous, especially as PMs, because as PMs, we need friction. We need to be challenged in our thinking. So take this silly exchange, for example. I asked ChatGPT about an alarm clock that wakes you up every 5 minutes and never turns off. So pretty objectively a bad idea, something that would probably not succeed out in the market. And instead of telling me, hey, this is not a great idea, let's go back to the drawing board, AI actually got quite excited. It called it a punishment clock. This was very entertaining, but as you can imagine, not very useful feedback for me as a PM. And this is, of course, an extreme example, but this same problem exists when we are pressure testing our own ideas within our own products and our own markets. AI by default is not going to be challenging us. It's going to be quite encouraging, and that can be really deceptive and dangerous. So what we actually need is a sparring partner. We need somebody that can challenge our thinking, elevate our thinking. And in order to do that, we really have to engineer it into our prompt. So I want to just introduce this framework for a personal board of directors, or I like to call it a board of dissenters, really giving ChatGPT specific roles that are modeled after real thinkers with distinct perspectives. And we're going to get into a couple of examples of who you could choose, how you can make sure you have a balanced board, et cetera. And you'll be able to deploy some of these in your own projects shortly. All right, so these are the different perspectives that I'll typically choose from. I'll generally choose 2 or 3 perspectives that are balancing each other out. I have a skeptic, a user champion, an executor, the visionary, and a systems thinker. And again, I won't have all of these on my board at once, but depending on what I'm working on, I might pick 2 or 3 of them. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. Feel free to grab a screenshot. But this is how I would define each of these personas, and then a few example individuals that you could, summon or spin up as a board of director to leverage in your thinking. So you can see here, I have the list of personas, the definitions, and then the individuals. It could be other individuals as well. This is just the list that I've used in the past. And then when it comes to building your board, again, you're going to want to assign AI a name, a background. What you're working on here is really engineering perspective and disagreement into your prompting with AI. So here's an example prompt. Feel free to grab a screenshot. You can use it yourself and try it out depending on your own project. And then this is what it would look like if you were, say, deploying like Steve Jobs to help with a project where you're deprecating features. You're giving it the right role, you're giving it some context on what you're working on, and you're asking for a specific perspective to push back on. All right, so everyone is unique and we're all working on different things. So there's no silver bullet, right? But think about your own natural tendencies and the types of decisions that you're trying to make, right? So select board members that are as far away from your own perspectives as possible. Again, remember, you're engineering in disagreement. So you don't want folks that are agreeing with you naturally. So here's a few examples. This was me chatting with Don Norman on a redesign project, and he was able to push back on some of my business metrics and ways that I was working with stakeholders that were challenging for me. And then another interesting use case that you can leverage is you can actually pit your advisors against each other and then observe where the tension lies, or observe where you are leaning towards or being drawn towards. So this was a conversation between Andy Grove and Elon Musk on resourcing decision I was facing. Okay, so taking a step back now. All of this prompting is related to product management, to growth, because it's elevating you to think better, think smarter. You can move a lot faster when it comes to strategy, and you can get alignment a lot quicker because your ideas are going to be better pressure tested, etc. So regardless of what you are focused on, you can leverage AI to come to a better decision, especially using a system of prompts like this, where you can have a personal board of advisors that are challenging. All right, so let's move on to section 2. So build something yourself. So you can see we're moving on from idea through execution now. And growth PMs, really, we've always been scrappy. So it's a good thing for us to be scrappy and want to build something quickly as quickly as possible. With AI, the scrappiness really becomes superpowers, even more so than before. So people who learn to build themselves are going to move faster, they're going to empathize deeper, and they're ultimately going to make better decisions. Building with AI is not really about, replacing engineers or replacing PMs. It's about removing friction between your ideas and your learning. And that's right where we are right now. With IDEA, we talked about how we could leverage better prompts to get better ideas. And now we're going to talk about how we can leverage these AI tools to execute faster, ultimately with the goal of learning more, having better learnings, etc. And that's really what growth product development is all about. So when you can prototype your own idea, it gives you a couple of advantages. First, you get understanding. So you can see what's easy, you can see what's hard, you can see where the real bottlenecks live, and this will help channel your thinking into the biggest ROI opportunities possible. And then second, I think this is underrated. You really gain empathy. You feel what your teammates feel. So that empathy makes you a better partner. It makes you a faster decision maker. Many people are still using AI like autocomplete. So just summarizing documents or writing Slack updates. And the frontier, what's possible today, has really moved, way beyond that. So your job as a PM really is to close that gap between what's possible today in your daily workflow and what's actually been adopted. You should be working in this future possible state as much as possible. This is very, very tactical. For anyone who has not started vibe coding yet or started using these AI coding tools, start small. So create a playground repository, a replit or a bolt or a lovable project. Create your own sort of like sandbox where you can explore end-to-end, front-end, back-end design system without fear of breaking anything. And that freedom is going to give you a certain level of confidence as well. And if you have never built anything and you're saying, Tommy, I'm not technical, I could never do this, open up ChatGPT, say something similar to what I have here on screen. I've never coded before. I don't know where to get started. Give me step-by-step instructions. And I guarantee before you know it, you'll be writing your first pieces of code, launching your first toy applications. So there's like two different buckets of tools, just to anchor everyone. There's the prototyping tools that are really helpful in getting an idea to life quickly. So Lovable, Replit, Bolt. And then there's that more heavier coding tools like GitHub Copilot, Claude, Cursor. If you're non-technical, I would recommend you start on the left-hand side here with a tool like Lovable, and then graduate your way into something like Claude Code or Cursor. So here's an example of a generic vibe-coded website that you could create. I think you'll find a dopamine rush when you create your first website or app or tool using these AI coding tools. Obviously, this is not a very useful website, but whatever ideas we have, especially as growth PMs, we can now breathe into life. There's no longer this barrier of working with a designer to get an idea or a clickable prototype onto a screen. We can now use these tools right away. And as you're doing this, as you're building your first code base, you're going to learn a lot about the front end, all of the tools and components that fit in there, the back end, all of the different tools that fit in there. And through these struggles and wrestling with these different tools and parts of a product, you learn quite a bit, and you really elevate your role as a PM. So this is a graph of my confidence level when I started vibe coding. You can see it got quite high. I felt really good about myself. I made a couple toy apps, a couple websites. I was sending them around. And then I said, you know what? I think I could actually do this in Amplitude's code base. I should be able to ship things. I know now how to use all of these different tools. I have GitHub access. And you can see my confidence fell through the ground. So this is I think, a really healthy graph, believe it or not, for anyone who's trying to push themselves to get closer to their company's code and make impact there. When you're inside a real code base, so not just your own personal toy apps, but your company's repository, everything slows down. So there's like environment setup breaks, there's tiny UI tweaks that are going to ripple through some legacy files that no one's touched for 10 years. So it can get really, really messy. And I think that's part of the point. Part of the point here is building respect, building empathy, building understanding so that your product decisions are sharper and you know what you're getting into when you're pushing in a certain direction. Okay, so a couple of call outs here. When you are building in your company's code base, start with prototypes. So start with helping your design partners out. You can prototype in Lovable, Bolt, V0, Replit. A prototype is always going to beat a couple of bullet points. So if you're sending a Slack message or you're giving a presentation, if you can have an engaging, clickable prototype, that's going to help quite a bit. And then on the engineering side, if you're venturing into that space, start really small. So if you do have GitHub access, you get your environment set up, start with small copy updates, ship what you can. I think most importantly, keep a pulse on what the tools are, what the models are, how they're changing. So you know when you can have sort of some outsized impact and when maybe it's better for an engineer to complete a given task. Okay, so this is a phenomenon that I felt that I wanted to spend some time on. When you are coding, when you are creating, you think whatever you're building looks like this. A beautiful castle. Who wouldn't love that? It's extremely valuable. And I think what you have to check yourself on is to make sure you're not actually building this. Are you actually building something that is valuable, that users will use? Or are you sort of biased because you spent the time building it? So while I'm saying in this section that is very important for PMs to be, designing with the prototyping tools and building with the engineering tools, you need to make sure what you're doing is actually still delivering value and solving real problems for customers. Creating something in and of itself is not going to have any sort of impact on your business. So the same sort of outcomes over output philosophy that we've talked about for years still applies even with these AI tools. Again, you're going to learn a lot about your teammates in doing this. You're going to build a lot of empathy, a lot of understanding, and this is going to help your team dynamics quite a bit. It's going to help you as a product manager a lot. This is my closing slide for this section. Core principles just to think about when you're actually building something yourself. So think about building a prototype before a PowerPoint. So don't just bring your ideas with your own opinions or some bullets. You can actually have a prototype that a customer could respond to or leadership could respond to, and you're going to get feedback a lot faster. This is going to enable you to move quicker and move forward with better ideas. Earn the right to complain. So no longer say we don't have resources. Try building something yourself, and you might find that there's a path forward that you can actually deliver something. Keeping in mind that speed does not equal success. So when we start working in these tools, it can be very addictive and we feel very excited by the speed that we see, but speed is not the actual outcome that we're driving. We still need to be delivering value for our customers and our business. And then not forgetting that this is just all about human beings, right? Software development, we're building for people. We're building for their motivations. their behaviors, their needs. So in growth, even outside of these AI tools, sometimes we can get too focused on experiment data and dashboards and numbers. And we are still building for actual human beings to improve their lives. So keeping that in mind along the way is important. All right, so let's talk about unlocking hidden insights. So we started out with the idea phase and how we can leverage better prompts to pressure test our ideas and improve our ideas. We talked about execution and how we can be building things ourselves, both designs and prototypes, but also working code to enable us, yes, to grow in our empathy, but also move faster and quicker. And now we're going to talk about learning. So how do we actually unlock the hidden insights from the things that we've built, the ideas that we've brought to life, so that we can continue to improve? So first off, what does this mean to unlock hidden insights? We've talked a lot about speed. AI is not just about speed. It's also about sharpening our judgment. So with insights and analysis, we're trying to move from raw data to understanding patterns to actually identifying what are the tangible growth levers that we can and should be pulling on to move a given metric. So all of this is in the spirit of making the invisible visible. So first, making faster decisions. AI is really, really good at giving a first pass analysis. So that could be around, your different queries or charts or summaries, but giving you sort of a gut check on what matters and what doesn't. It can help cut down the noise so that you know where to focus. A couple of examples here. If you're writing SQL, Claude, ChatGPT, they can really help you in your SQL writing. If you're interpreting Amplitude dashboards, you could leverage a lot of the features, not just in Amplitude, but a lot of other tools now where you can get your insight and your actionable insight quite quickly. So AI is in a lot of the products. It's also available in a lot of these tools like Claude and ChatGPT, where we can actually import our business context, the information, and help us make the decision a lot faster. Okay. Making better decisions. So we talked a bit about this in the first section, the idea prompting section, but AI can generate multiple what if scenarios in parallel, right? It's going to force you to consider things that you may normally skip or bypass, and it's going to help you ultimately make a better decision that's more well-rounded and hopefully not emotional. I think sometimes even as growth PMs, when we love data so much, it can be surprising, but we can make emotional decisions that are maybe not the best for our users or for our business, and AI can really help ground us. Experiment analysis. So it can do a lot of the grunt work that we don't like to do ourselves, whether that's dissecting experiment logs or calculating some lift that's maybe difficult for us to calculate. Initially, AI was not great at math. It's gotten quite better. So there's a lot more that we can outsource there. And then also visualization of results or better sort of like understanding of results. So what we're trying to do here is remove the human bias from really just cherry picking metrics. Sometimes as PMs, we run an experiment. Maybe it's a project that we've been working on for a couple of weeks. We get emotionally tied to it. And then we can sort of like cherry pick which metrics we think matter to push for a release of it. And that's what we want to really be careful of. And AI, again, can help us in the analysis to make sure that we are fully aware of what we're choosing and that it's the best possible decision. So some things like, was this statistically significant, or which segment responded the best, or, give me a summary that I can send to my leadership team. It can really help expedite the analysis period, but then also help us with our storytelling to get crisper on what we're telling to our org and to our customers. There are certain customer segments that we may not think of. We may have our own personas and customer groups that we share with our marketing or our different EPD partners. But AI can cluster users based on behavior and not just their demographic information. So this might help us identify long tail opportunities, remove some of the noise. We might find, power users that are in one sector, even though we thought our business was really focused on a different sector or did well in a different sector. For example, there's a lot of ways that we could ask and prompt AI to give us non-obvious clustering of users that could be a spark for us to investigate further. Voice of the customer analysis. So if you're a large scale B2B business or B2C business, there's going to be thousands of surveys or reviews or support tickets. And it's really difficult sometimes to get the right sentiment or themes or urgency behind all of these different requests. Obviously, as PMs, we can't do everything. We have to prioritize. And AI can be really effective in prioritizing the top pain points that are coming maybe from a given source, like Zendesk, or seen online, like Reddit. And it can do this very quickly. And then that can sort of expedite the rest of our work. Okay. This last section is around really bringing the three areas that we've talked about so far into focus. So we talked about ideas, we talked about execution, we talked about learning. And this is, as we mentioned, the typical cycle of software development, right? Usually there's some sort of analysis that's happening, experiment analysis or data analysis. There are some hypotheses that are getting created, PRDs, designs, tech specs. Ultimately, we're writing something and launching it, writing some code and launching that experiment. And then we're analyzing it and the cycle continues. Today, you can essentially do all of these tasks with Claude or Cursor or these different tools. So this is going to be really, really important as PMs for us to have a pulse on this change, right? There's fundamental changes happening at each of these stages, as hopefully came across in this presentation, whether that's how and when and why we write specs, the way the code is actually written and deployed, the way that code is experiments are being analyzed. So there's a lot of changes that are happening throughout this cycle. And as growth PMs, we need to have a really strong pulse and understand the speed at which this change is happening and where this change is happening so that we can drive the most impact. So I do think that there are ways as growth PMs that we can get involved at each of these stages ourselves. When it comes to the requirements phase, we can be crafting our prompts like we saw in the first section so that we are coming up with a crisp set of requirements. When it comes to the deployment phase, we can actually be vibe coding up prototypes to start off engineering, or maybe the underlying code itself using something like Cursor or Claude or Codex. And then when it comes to the analysis, we also can leverage these AI tools to have better analysis, ultimately come to better decisions, etc. So the world is changing. Plug into this change and have a really good understanding as to where you can drive the most impact. All right. Well, thank you so much. That was a lot of fun. If anyone does want to get in touch, here's my info on the screen. Feel free to reach out. And yeah, best of luck to everyone. Thanks.